The text message glowed in the darkness of my car. St. Andrew's Church. 2 p.m. You need to see this. Unknown number. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, watching guests filter into the old stone building through my rain-streaked windshield. My mind reeled, spinning between disbelief and dread. Was I really here? Was I losing my mind? My name is Ellie Sullivan, and right now, I'm parked across from a church, playing amateur detective, wondering how my life unraveled this fast. It was only supposed to be a regular Thursday. My husband Nathan had a work trip to Chicago. That's what the calendar said. That's what his assistant confirmed. Even the hotel booking checked out. But now, here I was, in Boston, across the street from a church I hadn't been inside since my wedding day, 7 years ago, because someone anonymous, wanted me to see something. This is crazy, I whispered to myself, fingers tightening around the steering wheel. But I was already reaching for my sunglasses, already pushing the car door open. The cold air slapped me awake, the rain kissing my skin as I made my way toward the church. Every step felt like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for. The church bells began to toll as I slipped in through a side door, finding a shadowed spot behind one of the marble pillars. The familiar scent of wood polish and incense hit me like a gut punch, yanking me back to my wedding day. Same church, same bells, but a different story unfolding. The organ music swelled, and my heart nearly stopped. There he was, Nathan, my Nathan, standing at the altar, looking dapper in a tuxedo I'd never seen before, his hands clasped in front of him, that same nervous tick in his jaw. He wasn't in Chicago. He was here, waiting. The bride appeared at the entrance, and the ground shifted beneath my feet. Dark hair, olive skin, that graceful walk. I knew that walk. It was Kara, my best friend since college, the woman who helped me pick out my wedding dress. The woman I trusted more than anyone. The woman marrying my husband. Dearly beloved. The priest's words melted into white noise as I watched them exchange vows, my husband and my best friend, promising to love each other until death did them part. Just like he promised me. I didn't remember leaving the church, didn't remember the drive home. But I remembered the moment I sat at my kitchen table, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting golden light through the windows Nathan insisted on replacing last year. My phone buzzed. Nathan, conference running late. Don't wait up. The audacity. I poured myself a glass of his favorite scotch, the one he only touched on special occasions. The liquid burned my throat, but I welcomed the pain. It was real. More real than anything else in my life right now. Another buzz. Unknown number. Now you know. What will you do about it? What would I do? I laughed, a sound sharp and brittle, foreign to my own ears, like breaking glass. And as I reached for my laptop, my fingers steadier than they'd been all day, one thought took root in my mind. It's time to stop being the victim. The old photo album sat heavy in my lap, its worn leather cover cool against my fingertips. I traced the edges absent-mindedly, flipping through the pages like they might somehow hold an answer. Each picture was a ghost. There we were, me, Nathan, and Kara, sprawled on a picnic blanket in my parents' backyard. Laughing, sun-kissed, young, and oblivious. Nathan's arm was slung around both of us, his head tipped back in mid-laugh. If someone told me back then that this photo would haunt me one day, I would have laughed in their face. But here I was. The sound of Nathan's footsteps echoed through the house. He'd been back from his conference for 3 days now, 3 days of pretending everything was fine, acting like I didn't know. "Ordered Chinese," he called up the stairs. His voice, once familiar and comforting, grated on me now. I stayed in our bedroom, flipping another page. More ghosts, more lies. There was Kara and me at graduation. Her arm hooked through mine. Her smile bigger than mine, like she'd just won the lottery. Maybe she had. Nathan's footsteps grew louder, and then he was standing in the doorway, 2 plates in hand, takeout boxes balanced precariously on top. "Remember when we used to get takeout with Kara every Friday?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Sharp, pointed, designed to wound. Nathan's smile faltered for half a second. just a blink, before he caught himself. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly, setting the plates down on the nightstand. "Was it?" I stood, letting the photo album slip from my lap and thud to the floor. "Because I saw her 3 days ago." His hand froze halfway to his mouth, chopsticks poised. His eyes darted to mine, and in that split second, I saw the cracks. The cracks I'd spent years ignoring. I don't. My voice was steady, steadier than I felt. "Don't insult me with excuses. I was at St. Andrews. I saw you." His face drained of color. The mask he wore so well, the charming husband, the loyal friend, slipped. And there it was. The real Nathan. Cold, calculating, dangerous. "It's not what you think." His voice dropped to that calm, measured tone he used when closing deals at work. The same tone he'd used to gaslight me 100 times before. I stepped forward. "When did it start? Before our wedding? After?" My throat burned with the questions I hadn't let myself ask. "Tell me, Nathan, was I the backup plan or just a convenient cover?" "You're not making any sense." His jaw clenched. His left hand twitched. His tell. I'd cataloged his habits for 7 years, learned his rhythms, knew when he was lying. "I've never seen you so nervous," I said, smiling bitterly. "Not even at our wedding." His eyes narrowed. "You've been drinking." I laughed. "That's your move. Gaslight the wife into thinking she's crazy?" "I'm worried about you." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "When did it start?" I repeated. "The lies, the secrets, the betrayal. Was it just with Kara, or has there been more?" "It's complicated." He ran a hand through his hair. Another tell. "There are things you don't understand." "Like what?" I crossed my arms. "The joint bank accounts you opened with Kara? The property you bought together? Or maybe the trust fund your mother set up for your future kids with her?" His head snapped up. "How did you—" "I'm not as stupid as you think, Nathan." I moved to the dresser, pulling out the stack of documents I'd spent the last 3 days compiling. "You really should use better passwords. Our anniversary? Cute, but not exactly secure." "Ellie." He stepped toward me again, hands outstretched like he was calming a wild animal. "We can work this out. I can explain." "Like you explained your business trip to Chicago?" I spread the papers across the bed, bank statements, emails, property deeds. "Or maybe we should discuss the trust fund your mother set up." He froze. His face turned ashen. "You had no right." "I had every right." My voice cracked, and suddenly all the pain I'd been holding back poured out. "I'm your wife, Nathan. I was your friend. We grew up together. And you?" I couldn't finish. My chest heaved, breath hitching. Nathan stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't recognize myself anymore either. "Get out." "What?" "You heard me." I grabbed one last document from the dresser, the power of attorney he signed last year when he was too busy to handle our estate planning. "This is my house now. Legally. You signed it over to me without reading it." His eyes widened in shock. "Ellie, you can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." I pointed to the door. "Get out before I call Michael and have him escort you out." Michael, my older brother, a Boston cop. Nathan's mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. He grabbed his coat from the chair and left without another word. I didn't move until I heard the front door slam. Then I sank to the floor, shaking. I picked up the photo album again. Flipped to that same picture, the 3 of us, happy and carefree. We were all such perfect liars. All of us. The cafe looked smaller than I remembered. Funny how places change when the people tied to them aren't the same anymore. Kara and I used to sit at that corner table every Saturday, sharing secrets over lattes. Now I was here to burn the whole thing down. I spotted her the moment she walked in. Same long dark hair, same effortless grace. She hadn't even changed her perfume, vanilla and jasmine, the scent I once found comforting, but now made my stomach turn. She slid into the seat across from me, fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Her wedding ring. The same exact ring Nathan gave me, glinted in the sunlight. The sight of it made my coffee taste like acid. "I didn't think you'd come," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I didn't think you'd marry my husband." Her face crumpled, but I wasn't here to coddle her. "Ellie? Did you know about the trust fund?" I cut in, pulling a stack of bank statements from my bag and sliding them across the table. Her eyes flickered with confusion. "What trust fund?" "Interesting." I watched her scan the papers, her hands trembling slightly. The blood drained from her face when she saw the number at the bottom. $3 million, I said, leaning back. Set aside for the grandchildren Nathan's mother always wanted. Guess I wasn't producing them fast enough. This can't be right." Her voice wavered. She pushed the papers back toward me like they might bite her. "Nathan told me the marriage was just a formality. For his inheritance, he said." I laughed. "Oh, please. What did he say? That he loved you? That I was cold, distant, career-obsessed?" I shook my head, because that's what he told his mother about me last month. Kara's head snapped up. "How do you know that?" "Because I've spent the last week uncovering just how thoroughly Nathan's been playing both of us." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. "Want to hear the recording of Nathan discussing property investments with his mom? The ones using your family's real estate connections?" Her mouth opened, then closed. "My family?" "Yeah," I said, leaning in. "Your mom's firm, Grace Realty. That summer internship Nathan helped you get? The one that convinced your mom he was such a great guy? Turns out, it wasn't about love. It was about access." The color drained from her face. "Stop," she whispered. "You're trying to hurt me because I hurt you. I get it. I deserve it. But what?" I cut her off. "You think I'm doing this out of spite?" I pulled one more document from my bag and slid it across the table. "Look at the date on that property transfer." Her hand shook as she read it. This is my mom's signature." Her voice cracked. "But she would never sell that property for half its value." "She didn't know she did." I tapped the paper. "Look at the witness signatures." Kara's face crumpled. I was just notarizing documents," she whispered. "Nathan said it was practice for my license." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know." "While I was planning our wedding," I said, voice cold, "you were unknowingly helping him steal from your own mother." The cafe went silent around us. Kara wiped her eyes and looked up at me. "What are you going to do?" "Wrong question." I stood, gathering the papers. "The real question is, what are we going to do?" She blinked. "We?" I nodded. "You have two choices. Keep playing Nathan's game and lose everything, or help me take him down." I pulled out a USB drive from my pocket and placed it on the table. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything I've found," I said. "Emails, bank statements, property transfers. It's all here. His entire plan is built on the assumption that you and I would never compare notes." Kara stared at the USB like it might explode. "If this gets out," she whispered, "everything burns." I placed my hand over hers, feeling the cool metal of her wedding ring, my wedding ring's twin. "This time," I said softly, "we'll be the ones holding the matches." Her fingers closed around the USB. For the first time in weeks, I saw a glimpse of the Kara I used to know, fierce, loyal, unstoppable when crossed. "When do we start?" she asked. I smiled, a real smile this time. "We already have." 3 empty wine bottles mocked me from the kitchen counter. Not my usual poison, but tonight wasn't a usual night. The dining room table was covered with documents, bank statements, contracts, emails. Every ugly truth about Nathan's schemes was laid out like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. My phone buzzed. Another text. "Nathan, please, let's talk about this rationally." Rational? Like the way he rationally built a life of lies? Like the calculated step-by-step precision with which he picked his victims, his business deals, his wives? The phone buzzed again. Kara. Grace is asking questions. We need to move faster. I turned off the phone, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It was all hitting me at once. The magnitude of what we were planning. This wasn't just about exposing Nathan anymore. We were about to destroy families. Reputations, lives. The doorbell rang. For a split second, I considered ignoring it. But then I heard the key in the lock. Only one other person besides Nathan had that key. Jesus, Eli, Michael muttered as he stepped inside, taking in the chaos spread across the dining room. When's the last time you slept? I waved vaguely at the papers. Did you know Nathan's dad killed himself? Michael froze. What? 10 years ago, I said, holding up a newspaper clipping I found buried in Laura's financial records. Officially, it was a hunting accident, but unofficially. I pushed a stack of bank statements toward him. Turns out, Nathan's dad found out Laura and Nathan had been embezzling from his company for years. He was going to turn them in. Christ, Michael whispered, sinking into a chair. Does anyone else know? Just the person who's been sending me anonymous tips. I tapped the burner phone on the table. They sent me this today. I slid a copy of William Mitchell's suicide note across the table. Michael picked it up, reading silently. His jaw tightened. He tried to stop them. I nodded. And they destroyed him for it. Michael reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I'm becoming them, Mike. The lies, the manipulation, the revenge. I'm turning into them. No, you're not. His voice was steady. You're protecting people. Am I? I started pacing. Or am I just so hell-bent on destroying Nathan that I don't care who gets caught in the crossfire? Michael didn't answer right away. Finally, he stood and took the wine bottle from my hand. You want to know the difference between you and them? I didn't look at him, but he kept going. You're standing here at 3 a.m, torturing yourself about the moral implications of your actions. They're sleeping peacefully, counting their money, and planning their next scam. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't, he said, organizing the papers on the table. But it means you have a choice. You can blow everything up at the reunion like you planned, or what? Or we do this the right way, legally, carefully. He held up the suicide note. We finish what Nathan's father started. We protect the people who need protecting. The burner phone buzzed again. Another message from the anonymous number. Ask Laura about the offshore accounts. I stared at the message, then at the chaos around me. 7 years of marriage. A lifetime of friendship. Generations of lies. Okay, I said quietly. Show me how to do this right. Michael nodded and pulled out his phone. First, we need to talk to someone who specializes in financial fraud. I know a guy. Wait. I grabbed his arm before he could make the call. Why are you helping me? Is it because I'm right, or just because I'm your sister? He met my eyes without hesitation. Both and neither. Then why? Because someone needs to stop them. His voice softened. And you're strong enough to do it without becoming them. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep in my chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was a better way to burn it all down. Michael's lawyer friend James Harrison spread more documents across his mahogany desk. I couldn't focus on his words. My eyes were glued to one sheet of paper. A list of names. Children, mostly. Beneficiaries of trust funds that would collapse if we moved forward. The offshore accounts are just the beginning, James said. Laura Mitchell's financial web stretches through at least 3 generations. How many people would be affected? My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. Directly? Around 30? He said with a shrug. Indirectly? Hundreds. Michael leaned forward. But we can prove the fraud, right? James nodded. Easily. The question is whether we should. He tapped the list of names. Some of these trust funds are supporting medical care. Education. My chest tightened. Stop. I stood abruptly, moving to the window. Boston stretched out below, oblivious to the bomb we were about to drop. There has to be another way. My phone buzzed again. Kara. Grace found the missing property documents. She's calling Laura today. We're running out of time, Michael said, reading over my shoulder. If Grace confronts Laura directly, everything falls apart anyway. I turned to James. How long would it take to secure protection for the innocent parties? Weeks. Maybe months. The office door burst open before he could finish. Laura Mitchell stood there, as polished as ever, but her eyes were wild. I should have known you'd run to Michael, she sneered. James stood quickly. Laura, my daughter works in this building, she interrupted. Did Eleanor tell you that? Did she tell you how many families she's willing to destroy for her revenge? I stared at her. That's rich, coming from you. Laura ignored me, locking her gaze on Michael. You think you're protecting people. William thought the same thing. Look where it got him. The air in the room shifted. What did you just say? My voice came out quiet, deadly. Laura smiled. William didn't just discover our schemes. He tried to fix them. He tried to protect the beneficiaries, just like you're planning. And you stopped him. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. You're not just fighting Nathan or me, Laura said softly. You're fighting generations of carefully balanced arrangements. Arrangements built on lies. Built on theft. You don't have to burn everything down, Eleanor. She pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on the desk. What's that? I asked. An alternative. Michael moved to block me from the envelope, but Laura held up a hand. It's a generous settlement. Everyone wins. Everyone? Michael snapped. Except justice. Laura's smile sharpened. Ask yourself, Eleanor, what do you really want? Justice? Or peace? My phone buzzed again, but I barely noticed. What if she's right? I whispered, staring at the envelope. What if trying to fix this just makes everything worse? Michael's jaw clenched. That's fear talking. Maybe? I looked at James. But what if fear is trying to tell us something important? The phone buzzed one final time before falling silent. Whatever Grace discovered, it was too late to stop it now. I picked up Laura's envelope, feeling the weight of decisions not yet made. I need to talk to Kara, I said finally, before we decide anything else. Because sometimes revenge isn't about who you're willing to hurt, it's about who you're willing to save. The Mitchell family estate loomed ahead, its windows glowing like warning beacons against the evening sky. Cars lined the circular driveway, the perfect facade, the perfect lie. Last chance to back out, Michael said quietly, standing beside me. He held the briefcase containing everything, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence we'd gathered. I adjusted my black dress. Fitting, really. A funeral outfit for a dynasty that didn't know it was about to die. I'm not backing out. My voice was steady, even though my heart hammered in my chest. They're already inside, Kara said, as she appeared at my other shoulder. Her voice was tight, her expression grim. Grace is with them. Nathan's watching the door like a hawk. Did you secure the exits? James has people stationed at every door, Michael confirmed, checking his watch. Once you start, no one leaves until it's done. I felt the weight of Laura's sealed envelope pressing against my ribs. Her offer, protection for the innocent, silence for the guilty. It was still unopened, still burning a hole in my resolve. We entered through the kitchen, where caterers bustled around, unaware they were serving the last supper of the Mitchell dynasty. Nathan spotted me immediately. His face flickered with relief, then suspicion. Eleanor. He moved toward me, champagne glass in hand. His smile was charming, too charming. I didn't think you'd come. And Miss Laura's big party? I returned his smile, but it felt like broken glass. Wouldn't dream of it. His eyes darted to the briefcase, then to Michael, then to Kara. I saw it, the exact moment he realized something was wrong. Laura's voice cut through the low murmur of conversation. Everyone, please gather in the main hall. The crowd shifted, carrying us with it. I caught glimpses of familiar faces. Grace, pale but composed. Laura's second husband, oblivious and beaming. Nathan's sister, clutching her children's hands. The children. God, the children. Laura raised her glass. Thank you all for coming to... Actually, I interrupted, stepping forward. My voice carried across the sudden quiet. I'd like to say something first. Nathan moved toward me, panic flashing in his eyes. Eleanor. Michael stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Kara moved to stand near Grace. Laura's gaze locked on me. Think carefully about what you're doing. I pulled out the sealed envelope, holding it up for everyone to see. I have thought about it, I said, my voice steady. For weeks, I've thought about nothing else. I turned to address the room. I thought about justice, about protection, about who deserves the truth and who deserves mercy. Eleanor, Nathan said again, his voice cracking with real fear now. Whatever you think you know, I know everything. I opened the briefcase, but instead of pulling out the documents, I pulled out William Mitchell's suicide note. About William's death, about the trust funds, about the 2 marriages, and Laura's schemes, and every lie that's kept this house of cards standing. The room erupted in whispers. Grace stepped forward, her face ashen. Megan, she said, her voice breaking. Is it true? Kara's shoulders sagged. I didn't know, Mom. Not until Eleanor showed me. Showed you what? Nathan's sister demanded, clutching her children tighter. What the hell is going on? I looked at the children, their confused faces, their innocent futures hanging in the balance. I took a deep breath. The truth, I said softly. I came here tonight to destroy everything, to expose decades of fraud and manipulation, to get justice for everyone who's been hurt by the Mitchell family's lies. I held up William's suicide note, watching Laura go very still. But standing here, looking at all of you, I realize there's something worse than being deceived, something worse than being betrayed. Nathan's eyes narrowed. What's that? Becoming the very thing you're fighting against. I reached into my purse, pulled out a match, and struck it. The tiny flame danced for a moment before I touched it to the sealed envelope. The paper caught quickly. I dropped it into the briefcase, watching as years of careful investigation turned to ash. No! Michael lunged forward, but it was too late. The evidence burned. With it burned my chance at revenge, my shot at justice, everything I thought I wanted. The fire alarm shrieked. Sprinklers activated, sending water raining down on us. People rushed for the exits, pushing past James's guards. In the chaos, through the smoke and spray, I met Laura's eyes. She knew what I'd done. I'd chosen mercy over destruction, protection over punishment. But her triumphant smile faded when I pulled out my phone and pressed send. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's redemption. Red and blue lights painted Laura's pristine kitchen in eerie flashes. The police officers moved efficiently, packing up boxes of evidence. The real evidence. Not the decoy files I burned at the party. Laura sat across from me at the marble island. Perfect as always, not a hair out of place. But her hands trembled as she drummed her manicured nails against her coffee cup. You chose this moment deliberately, she said quietly. The party, the family gathering. You wanted them all to see it. I slid William's real suicide note across the counter. Like father, like daughter-in-law, I said. He planned to expose you at your anniversary party too, before the hunting accident. The drumming stopped. Outside, I caught a glimpse of Nathan being led to a police car. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He saw me through the window, and for the first time, I saw fear in his expression. You don't understand what you've done, Laura whispered, her voice trembling. Those trust funds are being protected, I cut her off. I pulled out my phone and showed her the court orders I'd secured over the last 3 weeks. Every innocent beneficiary has been separated from your fraudulent accounts. The children will keep their college funds. The medical care continues. For the first time, real fear flickered in Laura's eyes. How? She breathed. I leaned forward. Did you really think I spent the last 3 weeks doing nothing? You gave me time, Laura. That was your mistake. A commotion at the door made us both turn. Grace entered, flanked by federal agents. Her expression was hard, her movements purposeful. Her eyes locked on Laura. You killed him, Grace said flatly. You killed William when he tried to protect my daughter from your schemes. Laura stood so abruptly that her chair toppled over. That's ridiculous. Grace didn't flinch. William was going to expose how you used Megan to access my company's records. I stepped in. How you manipulated Nathan into marrying both of us to maintain your financial facade. Everything I did was for this family, Laura snapped. No. Kara appeared in the doorway, tear-streaked but steady. Everything you did was for yourself, and now we all know why. I slid one final document across the counter, an old photograph. Laura went very still. William Mitchell, Grace's father, and Laura. William wasn't just trying to expose the fraud, was he? I asked softly. He discovered something else. Laura's face crumpled, her mask slipping for the first time. Grace's gasp echoed through the silent kitchen. That's my father. Her voice cracked. With you, 37 years ago. I nodded. 9 months before Nathan was born. The truth hung between us like smoke. Decades of manipulation, all to hide one desperate affair, one secret that tore everything apart. You destroyed everything, Laura whispered. Just like William tried to. No. I stood, gathering the remaining documents. You destroyed everything the moment you chose lies over love. Laura's shoulders sagged as the officers approached to escort her out. As she passed me, she whispered, Was it worth it? Burning everything down to save a dead man's honor? I thought about the children, their futures, now secure, about Kara and Grace, finally free from manipulation, about William, who died trying to protect us all. Some things, I said quietly, are worth burning for. The sun rose over the Mitchell estate, painting everything in shades of gold. The sirens had faded, leaving the air quiet, peaceful. Michael stood beside me on the front steps, a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I watched the last police car disappear down the driveway. No, I answered honestly, but I will be. We stood in silence for a long time, watching the morning unfold. Eventually, Michael gave my shoulder a squeeze. Go home, Eli. You've done enough. I nodded, but I didn't move until the driveway was empty. The last box from Nathan's study sat on my kitchen counter. I hadn't opened it yet. Through the window, I watched autumn leaves scatter across the backyard. The same yard where 3 kids once promised to be friends forever. My phone buzzed. Kara. Grace wants to meet both of us. The trial had ended yesterday. Laura and Nathan, both found guilty. The headlines called it justice. The society pages called it scandal. Neither quite captured the truth. I opened the box, expecting more documents, more lies. Instead, I found an old video camera, the kind we used during that summer before college. The doorbell rang. Kara stood there looking smaller than I remembered. She held up an identical camera. Found mine too, she said, in Mom's attic. We set the cameras on the counter, relics of who we used to be. Neither of us reached to turn them on. Did you read Nathan's statement? Kara asked. No. I poured 2 cups of coffee, a habit from before, when things were simpler. Did you? She nodded, her laugh brittle. He said he loved us both. Of course he did. I slid her cup across the counter. That's Nathan, living his own truth, even when it's a lie. The afternoon light caught the cameras, casting twin shadows on the counter. We should watch them, Kara said quietly, before Grace arrives, before we decide what happens next. I nodded. We both knew this wasn't just a meeting about reconciliation. It was about Grace's company, about second chances, about rebuilding trust from ashes. I connected the first camera to my laptop. The screen flickered to life. There we were. Young, laughing, whole. Nathan behind the camera, narrating our last summer before everything fell apart. "Stop," Kara said suddenly. "Look at that." I froze the frame. The two of us were sharing a joke, carefree. But it was Nathan's reflection in the window that caught my eye. The way he watched us both. Even back then he was planning. "He didn't destroy us," I said, realization dawning. "He just showed us who we already were." Kara's coffee sat untouched. "What do you mean?" I met her gaze. "You always wanted adventure. I always needed control." Nathan. He weaponized those truths. The second camera sat dark, unwatched. "Now we choose," I said softly. "Not between right and wrong, but between easy and true." The doorbell rang again. "Grace." Kara gripped my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not for loving him. For forgetting how to love you first." I squeezed her hand back, remembering Laura's words at the trial. "Love makes liars of us all." "Maybe," I said. "We stop trying to fix the past. Maybe we just build something new." Kara nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. About Grace's company, about second chances, about how sometimes revenge isn't about destroying what was. It's about creating what could be. Grace spread papers across the kitchen table. Plans for rebuilding. Moving forward. "Ready?" she asked. I thought of William, setting truth bombs to detonate long after his death. Of Laura, who built walls to protect secrets that weren't worth keeping. Of Nathan, who loved too desperately to love honestly. "Yes," I said, meaning it. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. Story 2. I'm Sophia Turner, a 27-year-old expert in digital marketing who enjoys spending her weekends in the colorful world of painting. Since I can remember, art has served as a haven for me, a place where creativity and color meet to provide inspiration and serenity. I had no idea that meeting Ethan Carter would cause a significant change in my life. Ethan is a financial analyst who is 32 years old. His infectious humor and impulsive manner left me speechless. We met in a neighborhood cafe on a cool autumn evening, sparking the start of our brief affair. What began as a lighthearted coffee discussion soon developed into something more meaningful. I started thinking about our future within a few months, and before I knew it, Ethan asked me to marry him, while having a picnic in the park at sunset. A year later, in front of family and friends, we exchanged vows in a small ceremony. I couldn't have been more different than Ethan. I thrived on discipline and meticulous preparation, whereas he lived for the excitement of the moment. We were a wonderful match, perhaps in spite of, or maybe because of our different personalities. While I gave him security and clarity, he added excitement to my painstakingly ordered environment. We appeared invincible together, as though we had found the ideal ratio of disorder to order. As we started the path of marriage, I realized that even the strongest relationships may be tested by life's obstacles, even if our love story felt like a contemporary fairy tale. I had no idea that the upcoming months would expose flaws in our ostensibly flawless foundation that I would be unable to ignore. The home was still alive with the spirit of festivity the day following our wedding. Every surface was covered with lovingly written cards and brightly wrapped presents, transforming our living room into a lovely albeit chaotic memory of the happiness of the night before. The doorbell rang while I was enjoying the silence while sipping my coffee. It was Linda and Greg Carter, Ethan's parents. Although unexpected, their arrival was not totally unwanted. I viewed this as a chance to strengthen our relationship because I hadn't spent much time with them prior to the wedding. As always immaculately dressed, Linda looked around the room. Her keen eyes were pulled to the group of guests right away. Santa seemed to have arrived early. With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, she said. Greg gave Ethan a back pat while laughing. "Did you two actually clean up?" I chuckled uneasily, not knowing how to react. Ethan didn't appear to care. He's busy opening a set of modern cooking gadgets that his cousin gave him. In the meantime, Linda's focus had turned to my Aunt Karen's gorgeous crystal vase. Gently, she turned it in her hands and lifted it up. "This is beautiful now," she thought. "On my dining room table, it would look fantastic." I blinked, taken by surprise. In fact, I was considering putting it in our entrance. My voice said, "Oh, but you won't even notice it here," Linda said, her grin faltering for a second. "At our house, it will be much more useful." Greg laughed and added his voice, "You won't really miss it, will you?" I looked at Ethan and begged him not to help me. "It's our wedding gift, Mom," he remarked with a simple laugh. "You have many different faces." He spoke in a light-hearted manner, as though the matter were a harmless joke. After putting the vase back on the table, Linda arched an eyebrow. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in her face. "You will eventually learn to share, Patricia, my dear. The purpose of family is to support one another. After all," she added in a condescending tone. They continued to carelessly claim more items, praising a set of exquisite china, and even making remarks about an opulent throw blanket, which made me feel more uneasy. I had the impression that our new life together was gradually being dismantled. Furthermore, Ethan's casual demeanor simply made me feel more uneasy. I was emotionally spent by the time they departed, but Ethan didn't seem to notice how frustrated I was getting. He shrugged as he opened another present and added, "They didn't mean anything by it." However, I saw it as more than a simple miscommunication. It was the initial rift in the picture of our ideal existence. A subliminal warning that when it comes to establishing limits, Ethan and I might not agree. I couldn't get rid of the sense that my new life was already being invaded as I started cleaning the living room, so I made a quiet decision to be watchful in the hopes that it would only happen once. However, I secretly dreaded that this was just the start. An important milestone was our first wedding anniversary. I desired a lavish celebration. I organized a special supper at Tiny Moor, a charming tiny eatery that Ethan and I loved for its delectable food and cozy atmosphere. It seemed like the ideal setting to commemorate the event, and a chance to further his relationship with his parents, Greg and Linda. I thought that love and familial ties would coexist peacefully that evening. Linda and Greg were sitting and looking over the menu when we got there. Linda smiled broadly as she greeted us. Her gaze swept over the tasteful furnishings. She tapped her immaculately manicured nails on the table and remarked, "This place is charming." Greg gave a nod of assent. "Very high-end." As the waiter brought us our menus, he winked and remarked, "Good choice, Patricia." I reached beneath the table and carefully took Ethan's hand. He squeezed mine reassuringly, quietly expressing gratitude for the work I had done to plan the event. I wanted to create a cozy, festive environment, so I ordered Ethan's favorite, salmon. However, the tension gradually increased as the evening went on. Linda glanced over the menu. Her gaze fell onto the most ostentatious objects. She said without looking at the waiter, "We'll have the filet mignon and lobster, not to include a bottle of your best red wine." Greg smiled cheekily and said, I tried to maintain a light-hearted tone, but my smile stiffened. "That was quite a party," I said, but my discomfort was hardly disguised. Ethan only gave a shrug. "This evening is unique. Let's have fun." All during the dinner, Greg and Linda enjoyed every morsel as if it were a magnificent feast, totally unaware of how much their decisions would cost. I tried to suppress my mounting annoyance by concentrating on my plate. I felt like a supporting character in a production that featured Ethan's parents, even though this was meant to be a celebration of our love. Ethan's face briefly showed astonishment at the amount when the check arrived, but he soon collected himself and gave his card to the person. With a sinking heart, I watched him. Instead of addressing the expenditure, as I had planned, he signed the receipt silently. Linda put her arm around mine as we walked out of the restaurant. Her voice was full of satisfaction. "This was really beautiful, Patricia." As if everything were already determined, she added, "We'll have to do it again next year." I feigned a grin, but on the inside, I felt invisible and unworthy. This should have been about us, our adventure, our love. However, it had turned into yet another platform for Greg and Linda to take center stage. As I laid in bed later that night, I couldn't get rid of the bitterness that was growing inside of me. I started to question how much longer I could keeping my mouth shut as it became increasingly clear that Ethan was unable to establish boundaries with his parents. My favorite time of year has always been the holidays. Thanksgiving signaled the start of a period of coziness, joyous decorations, and customs. Ethan and I had transformed our house into a comfortable retreat by combining early Christmas happiness with autumnal colors throughout the course of the week. Ethan's phone chimed with a message one evening when we were hanging lights across the living room. After reading it with a laugh, he gave me the phone. He smirked and remarked, "My parents are ahead of the game. Their Christmas wish list has already been sent." Wondering. I read the message thoroughly. I raised my eyebrows in shock. It was more than just a list of Christmas greetings. High-end gadgets, designer clothing, and other luxury items were listed in detail. As though taken from a catalog intended for the ultra-wealthy, each piece appeared more expensive than the one before it. "They can't mean it," I whispered as I returned the phone to Ethan. He seemed unconcerned and shrugged. "The nice thing appeals to them." What am I supposed to say? My gut knot grew tighter. It was more than simply presents. It was the anticipation that drove them. Like a thundercloud, the implicit pressure to live up to their extravagant expectations hovered over me. However, I had previously prepared considerate presents for Ethan's parents. I felt like my efforts would never compare to their list. I made the decision to continue wearing something classy, yet functional as Christmas drew near. An excellent coffee maker. I was hoping for a mix between thoughtfulness and realism. I gave the carefully wrapped box to Linda and Greg on Christmas morning. I truly hope for a favorable response. Linda smiled courteously as she opened the present. She put it aside without much attention and said, "Oh, how nice." She gave me a tiny item, a set of fragrant candles, in exchange a few moments later. Although the candles were beautiful, there was a noticeable imbalance. I turned to see Ethan enjoying a high-tech drone they had given him. He appeared to be truly happy, totally unaware of the difference in what they have given us. Ethan noticed my stillness later that night while we cleaned the living room. "Hello? Are you all right?" His brow wrinkled, he asked. I made an effort to grin. "I'm all right," I said. Even yet, my heart was heavy. I didn't want to ruin the festive mood by bringing up the imbalance, which would only lead to conflict. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that I wasn't regarded. While I had graciously donated, it seemed as though the returning presents were an afterthought. I felt that my attempts to establish a relationship with Ethan's parents were being ignored. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, the flickering flames mirrored my mounting annoyance. Once a time for happiness and camaraderie, the holidays now seemed to serve as yet another reminder of our family's implicit hierarchy. I instantly considered giving Ethan a unique surprise when I got an unexpected quarterly bonus at work. I wanted to restore the spark that previously marked our relationship, since the unsaid tensions between us had made life feel heavy. A romantic vacation in Venice. The city of love appeared to be the ideal location for reconnection and retreat. During a quiet supper that night, I expressed my amazement. "Ethan." I couldn't contain my enthusiasm as I started. I arranged for us to travel to Venice alone so that we could explore the canals and take in the splendor of the city that we had always wanted to see. A part of him that I hadn't seen in months was rekindled by the delight in his eyes. "Venice? Really?" He pulled me into a close embrace and said, "That's amazing, Sophia." I had the fleeting impression that we were once again the carefree pair we used to be. However, that happiness didn't last long. Ethan's phone rang the next evening. It was Linda, his mother. I heard him talking about our plans. He was bursting with enthusiasm. "Venice is our destination. Is it not unbelievable?" I froze in silence, hoping he would keep the talk short, but when his tone changed, I was disappointed. "You've always wanted to go, Mom, I know." He spoke in a tone that became less enthusiastic. He turned to face me as he hung up. Uncertainty clouded his face. He tentatively responded, "They want to come with us," as if he were asking for my permission to accompany us to Venice. My voice was shaking with amazement as I asked. In an attempt to defend their request, he nodded. "Never have they been. They're also growing older. I'm sorry, Sophia. They have greatly benefited me. I clenched my hands, trying to remain calm. Ethan, this vacation was meant to be for us, only us. I've been anticipating our time together free from interruptions. If we say no, they won't understand, he continued in a tone that was almost imploring. I inhaled deeply as my annoyance boiled to the surface. Ethan, they've had enough. Now it's about us. This vacation was funded by my bonus, and I want everything to go as planned. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan nodded. You're correct. I will speak with them, he stated. Even yet, his determination appeared weak at best, but that discussion never took place. My phone rang with a slew of bank alerts a few days later as I was seated at my work. As I opened them, each transaction seemed like a blow to my heart. Hotel reservations, airline tickets, and other fees. It's all for Venice. The most heartbreaking reality was exposed by the timestamps. The plane was already on its way. Without my knowledge or approval, Ethan had used my bonus to pay for his parents and his own trip to Venice. As I comprehended the treachery, my hands began to shake. What was intended for us had been taken and handed away by the guy I had trusted and with whom I had formed a life. His number went directly to voicemail when I tried to call it. As I left a message, my voice broke. I saw the charges, Ethan. You used my money to take your folks to Venice. I am at a loss for words. Hopefully, it was worthwhile. After that call, the home felt more chilly and alone than before. I sat at the kitchen table and mentally reenacted what had happened. I could no longer ignore the pattern, the imbalance, the disrespect for my feelings, and the ongoing sacrifices I was expected to make with a heavy heart because of the weight of his treachery. I went into my accounts and started to cancel the hotel stays, the flights back, and any other trip-related costs that were still associated with my money. Every cancellation was like cutting off a thread that had connected us. It was obvious what to do next. After speaking with the bank, I denied Ethan access to my accounts. He had irrevocably damaged the trust that had been put in him, and I realized that going ahead, I would need to defend myself. I packed a bag that night, abandoning the life we had created. I experienced an odd feeling of finality as I set my wedding ring on the counter, its icy metal gleaming in the low light. I needed this conclusion, even if it wasn't the one I had imagined. I was waiting for Ethan when he got back from Venice. I could see the uneasiness in his eyes as soon as he entered the room. He put his bags down as my icy stare made his attempt at a smile falter. We must speak. My voice was steady but sharp as I spoke firmly. With a groan, Ethan combed through his hair. I understand that you're upset, Sophia, but I was unable to refuse them. They've always desired to travel, and you believed that using my money without my consent was acceptable. I broke off, letting my annoyance show. Ethan, this was more than just the trip. We were the focus. I wanted to get back in touch with you. Defensively, he said, they're my parents. They have greatly benefited me. I didn't want to let them down. How about me? My voice broke with emotion as I asked, does it really matter that I'm happy? Or should I just continue to make sacrifices while they get what they want? Ethan averted his gaze, his quiet saying more than words could. I understood that this was more than just the trip, and the distance between us felt insurmountable. It was about a lack of boundaries, misaligned priorities, and years of unvoiced frustrations. The days that followed were a haze of awkward conversations and icy silence. Even casual conversation felt forced in our once vibrant home, which had devolved into a place of tense cohabitation. I waited for some indication that Ethan realized the seriousness of his behavior, but it never materialized. The weight of everything fell on me one evening as I sat by myself in our poorly lighted living room. I couldn't continue to live this way, feeling ignored and underappreciated all the time. I had to take charge of my life now. I went to the bank the following morning to cut off our financial connections. I was assisted in removing Ethan's access to my accounts by the manager, a gracious woman in her 40s. Let's make sure you're totally covered, she continued, her comforting tone bringing a little sense of relief. With my cash secured, I packed my things and headed to my sister Isabella's place. She opened the door before I even knocked, pulling me into a loving embrace. Sophia, I've been so anxious, she began, her distress clear as we sat in her kitchen. I told everything Venice, the betrayal, the growing gap between Ethan and me. Isabella listened closely, her emotions swinging between incredulity and rage. "You deserve so much better," she added firmly, her hand clutching mine. "I know," I said in a determined tone. "I'm filing for divorce because of this. I can't continue to be married to someone who doesn't appreciate me." Isabella assisted me in settling in and making plans for the next days. Every minor act of reconstruction, arranging my possessions, it was like taking back a piece of myself when I looked into divorce attorneys. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful as I stood by Isabella's window one evening and watched the city lights sparkle in the distance. Someone who took advantage of me was no longer a part of my life. I was prepared to start anew, and it was my responsibility to rebuild. The silence was broken a few days after I moved into Isabella's house by an unexpected knock on the door. Greg and Linda were inside when I opened it. Anger tightened their faces. They entered without waiting for an invitation. There was tension in the room because of them. "Sophia, you're rather brave." With a shrill, accusing voice, Linda spit, "Destroying our family's holiday in such way. Behind our backs. Canceling everything. How embarrassing that was for us. Do you know?" My heart was racing as I remained motionless, but Isabella moved forward before I could react. Her defensive posture was solid. "That's enough," she responded in a composed yet commanding tone. "You will not insult my sister by entering my home." Greg laughed. "All we're trying to do is reason with her. She is acting self-centeredly, destroying the family because of something so unimportant." "Insignificant?" Isabella's eyes blazed as she snapped. "It is not insignificant to take someone else's hard-earned money without their consent. It's not insignificant to disregard Sophia's sentiments. Both of you have done nothing except exploit her generosity, and now it's over." Despite her scarlet cheeks, Linda refused to give up. "It's not over yet." Her voice was brimming with outrage as she yelled. Isabella retorted, "It's over," gesturing to the door. "I'll call the cops if you don't leave now." There was a lot of tension in the air after the altercation, but when Linda and Greg rushed out, slamming the door behind them, I suddenly felt clear. Isabella's face softened as she turned to face me. "You made the correct decision," she murmured softly. I realized then that she was correct. My determination was strengthened by the encounter. There was no turning back. The moment has come to move on. Letting go of the poisonous relationships that had held me back for so long. It was like reaching the finish line of a long race when the divorce was finalized. A peculiar mixture of relief, melancholy, and, most importantly, a sense of release permeated the crisp wind as I left the courthouse. The love and promise-filled chapter with Ethan was now over. The opportunity to rebuild and take back my life on my own terms, however, came with that closure. Moving into a little bright apartment in the center of the city was the first step I took toward freedom. Despite its modesty, it seemed like a blank canvas that was just ready to be painted. I carefully chose furniture that matched my style, mounted my paintings on the walls, and filled the room with plants, a mix of homey charm and contemporary simplicity. As my surroundings began to take shape, each piece I positioned seemed like a claim to my newly discovered independence. I shifted my attention inside and rediscovered my forgotten passions. Painting became my therapy once more, and the calming pattern of brushstrokes on canvas gave me comfort. More than anything else, though, I felt compelled to share my experience in order to relate to anyone who might be going through similar difficulties. I launched my blog, Reclaiming Sophia. At that point, I shared my heartfelt experiences of sorrow, recovery, and personal development on my blog. Embracing the beauty of isolation, finding delight in mundane routines, and decorating my first house were some of the tiny successes I wrote about. The reaction was tremendous. Readers who shared their own tales poured in, thanking me for being honest and providing words of support. My blog became into a community as the weeks stretched into months. I made friends with strangers, and their encouragement helped me feel less isolated. Reminding others that living after loss wasn't just feasible gave me a sense of purpose. It may be lovely. I had a cup of coffee on my patio one very cool autumn morning, The residence in the city provides a cozy background. I felt at ease for the first time in what seemed like forever. I had established a completely independent existence, liberated from the burden of other people's expectations. I felt prepared to take on whatever came my way, even though I knew the path ahead wouldn't always be easy. No one could take away the strength I had found within myself. I realized how far I had come and grinned as I shut down my laptop after writing another blog entry. Moving on was only one part of my journey. It was about accepting every aspect of who I was and finding who I was, scars and all, flaws. I was prepared to write this new chapter, which was just getting started, one courageous and optimistic move at a time.